Today's guest has spent decades at the intersection of customer needs and technical innovation, managing high stakes portfolios and crafting cultures of resilience and responsiveness. From manufacturing floors to the boardroom, he's learned what it takes to stay ahead while keeping people at the center. If you're ready to be inspired by stories of leadership and grit, this episode is for you. Hello, and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and we have an exciting guest and episode lined up today. But first, a quick reminder, check us out at themfgconnector.com, and don't forget to connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you're looking for industry solutions and innovations in action, make sure to catch the Manufacturing Connector on YouTube, where we dive into real world products and practices shaping our industry. Now, today's guest is Sean Walters, General Manager at CapTron North America. With over 20 years in business development and sales, Sean brings a unique perspective on building customer-focused teams and resilient supply chains. CapTron, a leader in sensor technology, serves industries from robotics to food and beverage, and Sean is leading the charge on customer-centric innovation and responsiveness. In this episode, Sean will share his journey through manufacturing, the leadership philosophies that drive him, and the real-life challenges he's tackled. We'll explore how he's woven resilience and adaptability into his teams, his approach to keeping customer satisfaction at the forefront, and his thoughts on what defines a healthy company culture. It's going to be a conversation packed with insights, probably a few laughs, and plenty of lessons from someone who truly walks the talk in manufacturing. So let's jump in. Sean Walters, welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. How are you doing today?
Jim, I am doing fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. Seems overwhelming to me, but looking forward to our conversation today.
I am too, man. I am too. Really excited to have you here. We first jumped on a call right before IMTS about this, and by the pumpkin in the background, people will know that this is right around Halloween, even though that's not when this episode will air. So it is what it is, but I love the decor. Did you carve that yourself?
No, I did not. Aaron and Eileen did that one. We did a different one, and it's getting its guts cleaned out right now. It's a little bit automated, and Eli has to clean off the pumpkin off our buttons. So that one's in the back right now.
Awesome. I love that, man. I absolutely love that. So, Sean, let's dive in with the first question, kind of that icebreaker. To kick things off, I want to know, the audience wants to know, what does culture mean to you, especially in the context in manufacturing, and what in your experience has shaped that definition?
Oh, that's a big question and a great question. And I firmly believe that culture will make or break an organization, period. And creating a healthy culture, I think, is something that an organization has to constantly be thinking about and working about. So for me, it's not very complicated. It's treating others how you want to be treated. That's probably first and foremost. And it's doing things that you want your team to do, right? And so those two things alone, I think, are the biggest requirements. And that being said, it's still challenging at times, right? Because, we all, sometimes we want to quit earlier. We want to get something done at home. And I have a fantastic team that, we'll find ourselves at a point where someone's trying to get something done and they'll have to work late. And then we'll all be here working together as a team. And to me, that's what really defines a culture. What people do when they don't talk about it. And that's what the most important thing is about culture. Because, you asked the question, but, Navy SEALs don't sit and talk about culture when they're in the thick of it, right? They just do what they do, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that's what culture is what people do when they don't talk about it.
I love
trying to cultivate that and trying to create an environment where people can be themselves. I think that's what it's about.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's a really powerful definition, and excited to dive into your history, your story, because I'm sure that story of yours really helped shape this definition that you have, right? So let's dive into that. Tell us your story. What led you into a career in manufacturing that you want to share with us?
Jim, how much time do we have?
As much time as you need, man.
No, I thought about this question a little bit. I love manufacturing and I love automation, but to give it a little context, I'll go back. I had a very eclectic father. I grew up. He was a scuba instructor in Wisconsin, which kind of sounds like an oxymoron. But
Yeah.
I spent most of my adolescent years carrying tanks up and down a beach and helping my dad teach people how to scuba dive.
Wow.
And he was kind of like a modern day or kind of a Steve Irwin. When I was a kid, my dad caught an alligator in Florida and brought it home and had it in our basement. I couldn't go in our basement for like a month when I was a kid, but I say all that because when I graduated college, I knew I didn't want to be a scuba instructor, right? And so I ended
Okay.
up getting an internship at Walgreens, and I was in the retail space and I hated it. I mean, I did it for a year and I'm like, I'm not going to make it in this real life if I have to do retail for the rest of my life. And I was very fortunate to have a friend who worked at Incinerator at the time. And I went to him and I said, hey, Bill, I don't know what people do out here in these buildings. I grew up carrying tanks on a beach. What do people do outside of scuba instruction? And where my passion started is he took me in the manufacturing facility of Incinerator, and I was just enamored with it. Where they literally have the capability of producing somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 garbage disposals a day.
Wow.
And you're watching all these conveyors go around, and there's people, doing things, and I had no idea. But I was fascinated by that, right? And I'm like, I want to be part of this, and that's what launched my career into that. And I joined a company at the time. I forgot the name of it, but it's called Emerson Store Support. And we went around and we kind of like helped with the automation for the products that we sold into the Home Depots. But then it started with ASCO, and I worked for ASCO Valve. For those who've been in manufacturing, you've probably seen those little green solenoid valves. And
Hmm.
I loved being part of that journey with people. I loved coming into a situation where they had a problem or they had a need to figure out how to do something, and to be part of that jigsaw puzzle of automation was just fun, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that was just the wildest thing to be part of. And I've always enjoyed people. I've enjoyed sales, finding solutions to those problems, but it just has become even more fascinating as the years progressed. How much automation is just part of our everyday lives. So
Yeah.
that's kind of part of my journey and how I got into it. And literally, Jim, one story that I love to share is, when I was in sales in Wisconsin, there was a time where I was in northern Michigan, and I got to go into a bottom of an iron ore mine, and going walking down there, and it looked literally like this scene out of Total Recall, right? And we, as the manufacturer I was working with, they had gotten so efficient at mining iron ore, they had got into their old pile of iron ore and started remining that because we've gotten so much better at it. And so watching these giant machines crush the stone and and this pipe that was probably 100 feet long, melting the iron ore. I'm like, this is just fascinating to be part of. And then literally the next day, having to put a static suit on and walk into a clean room. I mean, that being part of that space, it's just fun. I mean, that's what I get excited and passionate about, and helping people find solutions for what they're looking for. Like I said, it's a giant jigsaw puzzle. And you
Yeah.
look at conveying alone, how many different ways people take a can from point A to point B or whatever. And it's just so much fun to watch people design things like that.
That's awesome. And that imagery of Total Recall, it put me exactly into that mind because I knew exactly what you were talking about. Sean, tell us a little bit about your experience with business development. Business development has been a big part of your career. Was there a moment or a mentor or a person that really inspired you to go into and focus on that business development path?
I can say that I'm blessed to have several mentors, and that's something to me, as part of my journey. Like I said, my dad was a scuba instructor, right? So I had no idea what the real world did, and of course, college helps you with some ideas, but when you get out there, you're like, well, what do I do now, right? And I can remember a couple. I have Uncle Bob, who's just been a phenomenal business mentor to me. He was an executive at Coca-Cola, and I would constantly call him on how to deal with certain things. But in the sales world, and there's going to be several people who may listen to this podcast, Bob Kemple was just one of those people that just spoke life into you when you talked to him. He challenged you in certain ways, and then he inspired you in other ways. And the way he built those two things together was so unique to me. And it's one of those things that I aspire to be like that, just where people wanted to be around him. He just had this aura about him. When he walked into the room, he owned the room. He'd look at you when you were working on some project and you were telling him about it. He'd like, all right, I'm going to give you these tools, but don't go screw it up, right? and you just smiled, right? Because you knew he wanted what was best for you, right? And he had your back and he cared about you as a person. And he was absolutely one of those business mentors in my company that I had that, anybody who knows this man is going to appreciate that. They're going to have a big smile on their face when you hear about Bob Kemple. So he was certainly one of them. And then I always had a few other peer salespeople that I connected with. Part of my journey, when I talk about it, is when I was with Emerson, we were always paired up in districts. And I had a partner who was kind of my opposite in a lot of ways. I was the charismatic, the engaging personality, and he was a little bit more of the reserved. He was very pragmatic and logical, and we helped each other a lot. We balanced each other out a lot. And I think that for helping customers in their space, where he would really pull me back at times and say, Sean, you got to think about it from this perspective, put yourself in that shoes and, don't lose sight of what the customer wants here. So we always had really good checks and balances. And I'd say, hey, Dave, you gotta step it up here a little bit. So we had a really nice balance. And so part of my business development journey was having these people in my life. And I was never shy about talking to other people. That to me is the most important. I mean, if I was to encourage anybody listening to this podcast, is develop really strong mentors outside of your world that can kind of look into your world from the outside and see through the forest when you're stuck in it. And then people that are inside your world that, help you, guide you, give you things to think about, and can help you with that more tactical approach for sure.
Yeah.
But third, I'm still in business development. I think if you're in an organization and you're part of the vision of it and wanting to grow an organization, you're in business development. I don't care if you're punching numbers in the back or you're visiting customers in person. If you have a healthy culture, everybody is in business development. And to me, that is part of the journey. And you look at the 30 plus years, and I'm doing it now, is just engaging people and trying to put them first. And part of, and I hope I'm not rambling too much, Jim, but part of your introduction is walking the walk and talking the talk, and that's easier said than done. And I've screwed it up more times than I've gotten it right. But that's my compass, right? I want to be pointed that direction. And if I get off, I have people that speak into my life, and hopefully I've encouraged my teams to say, hey, to me, the best thing that I could do as far as culture is concerned is when my team comes to me and says, hey, Sean, I don't agree with you there, or you're a little off here, and this is what you need to be doing. When you can create that type of culture, you've won, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's what it takes to win, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that's where the journey is just a lot of fun. And if you can create that type of environment, that's where people can be successful.
Yeah.
People can be themselves. And ultimately, here's the story I tell. And Jim, you might get a kick out of this. Like, been in sales a long time. In college, I was in commission sales for Sears.
Oh, wow.
I was an electronic salesperson. I loved it. I'm a people person. People would walk in and, we'd have TVs and computers, those big old iMacs back in the day. And I'm slightly competitive as well. And I remember to this day, I would walk in every day and clock in, and at the clock, they'd have the leaderboard of salespeople for specifically for aftermarket warranty sales. And I was always at the top of that list. I loved it. I mean, I ate it up. Sean, you get kind of and one day there was this other kid who came in, and he started in sales, and he was a little bit more quiet, a little bit more reserved. And I'm like, oh, this guy's not going to make it, and all of a sudden his name started coming to the top of the list, and my name started to drop, and I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I'm not doing anything different. Maybe he just had better nights of sales. And finally what I had learned is, as his name started to come to the top, I started making my sales about me and not about my customer. Oh. And it was very subtle, and it was probably more psychological. but I was trying now to sell the warranties. I was trying to push the customers, and my sales started declining.
Yeah.
Right. And so I use that as an example. Is when I made it about me, and I still wrestle with this to this day, oh, I want to grow this business. I want to do this. When I made it about me, I started to lose, because if you want to have a successful culture, you have to make it about the customer. You have to make
Yeah.
it about what do they need. And the challenge is when stress comes, hey, we have to make a number, we have to grow our business. You start to look at that bottom right-hand side of whatever spreadsheet you're looking at. When the stress comes, you start making it about me, right? You start
Yeah.
making it about your company, and you don't make it about the customer. So I use that story. When I realized what I was doing at 21 years old, I said, oh man, this is what I'm doing. And then I started focusing on the customer again, and my sales started to climb, and I became friends with this other salesperson, and the ego came in check. But I wish I could say that was the last time it ever happened. But when I lose my direction, that's what I go to, is I'm making it about me. And
Got it.
that when you get into leading people, you can see it anecdotally, and you realize very quickly when you have a team, like, this is very fragile when you have a healthy team, right?
Yeah.
You can wreck it. And the only thing that I'm very grateful is that I have a team that gives me a lot of grace, because I've already screwed it up, right? And I think the other thing that you have to, if you want to have a successful and healthy culture, is you have to have a level of transparency, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of that broken piece it's kind of like one of those soft, fuzzy words we don't like to talk about in business. It's not kind of the manly word per se, but being transparent and broken, say, hey, I don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
We got to figure it out together. And if I screw it up, give me some grace here. But that's the type of language we use here to say, hey, and that's the type of language my boss uses, right? He's not scared of those conversations.
I love it.
I recently was in a very large negotiation, and I screwed it up. I mean, I misstepped. I've
Okay.
done this for a long time. I've negotiated with large organizations. I've been up to midnight on conversations with the CFO of Philips Respironics, right? And so I've seen those stressful moments, but I knew where I screwed up, and I went right to my boss, and he was so cool with it. He's like, "Hey, that's cool. We got to move on," right?
Yeah.
And so because he has that culture, and that which I try to carry that culture forward, we just have a level of tightness at this organization that I have never seen before.
Wow. And so, uh, how do you lead your team at CapTron with that customer-centric focus, right? Because that's not innate to a lot of organizations. That's not an innate thing. How do you foster that focus and make it about the customer and not about the individual?
Well, I think it first starts with just casting that vision, right? And our mission state is to be the most technically supportive partner to our customers, delivering value every day, right?
Okay.
That is our mission statement. Eileen's got it on the wall in here. That's what we look at, and that sets the direction, right?
Yeah.
And then you start to put some pragmatic steps behind that. We want to respond to our customers within 4 hours. We want to confirm orders within this. If they call us, we're going to pick up the phone. We're going to have somebody who, you can understand on the phone. You start to put some practical things behind that. And to me, that tells the customer you're important,
Yeah.
and even to the same degree, as far as what we talk about with the internal dialogue, if we screw up, we say, hey, we screwed up. We're sorry. We're going to try to fix that. And we find that customers are no different. Hey, you screw up. We delivered something that was wrong, or it was misprogrammed. They're very gracious when you own it and you fix it and you move on. In fact, I
Yeah.
think, it's not like we want to make a business practice out of it, but when it does happen, you build a better relationship, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, that's just very important. But you start to put those things in place, and you start to measure them. There's a level of management to it, right? You want to make sure when we drop the ball, how do we pick it up? How do we fix it? And the same goes for how we engage our parent company. Hey, these came out of our ERP wrong. How do we fix that?
Yeah.
And we're going to automate this. We're going to do that. So, and I think that's what really brings the customer center and focus. And like I said, we're honest with them. We screw up, we own it.
Yeah. That's great. One of the other things that struck me about our initial conversation, Sean, was your passion for building resilient supply chains and doing that within your customer centric focus, right? Of focusing on that customer. So, what does a resilient supply chain mean to you, and what steps are you and CapTron taking to help achieve that at your customer level?
Well, I think that's one of the biggest challenges we learned through COVID, right? Is supply chains. I mean, if we had a dollar for every time we heard COVID or supply chains, we probably wouldn't have to work anymore, for sure. But you know, I companies have gotten to the point where their supply chains were so sprawled out. They were so in, and they worked as long as they worked, right? But
Yeah.
COVID showed that there was weakness to it. But I think the word that we talk about when we talk about resiliency is investment, right?
Mm.
If you're going to put the customer first, you have to invest in things that work for the customer. And for us, in some very simplistic ways, it means having stock on our shelf. We don't have everything because we have a lot of little niche dynamic products out there, but we have almost everything we sell. We have 90% of it on our shelf and get it out to our customers in a fairly quick turnaround. And that's rare these days. You know, you work with a
Yeah.
lot of these big organizations. They have spent so long sprawling out their tentacles of supply chain that they can't react quickly. And that's the value we want to bring to our customers. And you want to talk about supply chain, answering the phone, having somebody who
Yeah.
knows what they're talking about with regard to the product that you're supporting them with. That's all part of that resiliency that I think people are kind of used to bad support now.
Hmm.
And, somebody who offers some level of care is going to get their attention, and
Yeah.
that's part of our, kind of dovetailing the two conversations together. That's the customer service part with having a solid supply chain and being reactionary to that.
Yeah.
And, furthermore, our, we call it parent company, but CapTron, it's a large organization, but, we make heavy investments there in inventory as well. So, I mean, some of our products, even through the worst parts of COVID, were still on 3 or 4 week deliveries. And they have PCB
Wow.
boards and they had everything else that everybody else was struggling with. We just made the heavy investments to keep the customer first.
Yeah. That's awesome. Um, Sean, going back to your mentors, it was neat to hear, about your mentors. I'm curious how you approach mentorship in your leadership position, right? Tell us about uh, how you've helped your team members grow because you are a very culture centric, customer centric, walk the talk leader. How do you mentor your teams? Because I don't see a whole lot of that out in the field in really any industry. I don't want to just pick on manufacturing. Mentorship has kind of gone by the wayside in that leadership position. How do you do that?
Well, I think there's a couple different things that I think about when, we talk about mentorship or coaching. I love coaching. So for me, that's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Just opportunities to improve, opportunities to challenge each other. I think probably the first thing is you open that doorway to being at both directions for learning. It's an opportunity for learning. But I think the number one thing I think about, especially if it's something that I, may not have the words for, is timing. Something like, hey, sometimes the best time to address an issue is right then and there, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, no, let's take care of whatever we're working on, and we'll park this here later, and then we'll have a conversation. A lot of times I'll use stories or ways to help the person understand the point. If I'm trying to make like I'm very very specific. One conversation I had about somebody who was looking at their phone during one of my meetings, and it was like, okay, it was distracting to me, but I chose not to address it right in that meeting. It would have been too distracting for the whole thing. But this person had aspirations to lead, and so I asked her to write up what she thought good leadership would look like. And so what I did with this particular coaching moment is I say, okay, all right, so you want to lead this group of people, you want to have these responsibilities, okay? And if you were conducting a meeting and somebody was on their phone while you were having that meeting, how would you handle that? And I mean, and the dawning came upon her as she's like, I didn't even realize I was doing that, Sean. And
Mm.
So she started walking through how she would treat, I said, well, I chose not. She actually said, well, I would just address it right then and there. And so I said, well, I chose not to. I felt it would be more important to use this type of opportunity to coach you. And that was well received, right? And
That's awesome.
It was something that I was really struggling with, because it's like, damn it. I mean, we're in the middle of a meeting and you're doing this with your phone. And I mean, it just was, and of course we all struggle with that at times, but that's how I really focus on some of my personal mentorship and coaching and dealing with conversations. And I think the other part, like I said, to me is being open to that being both ways. You got to create that environment. In the US for CapTron, we're a startup and we have a large customer with Amazon and they use our buttons globally, and it's a great resume, right? But sometimes you got to be careful of the devil you dance with, but we're growing this business here in the US. It's been a long established business in Germany, very project driven, but we're taking these products that have a lot of value in different space and we're commercializing them. And so there's a lot of challenges with that, right?
Yeah.
But you have to be open to that conversation, especially in the startup field, that we have. And to be fair, Jim, that's been a big adjustment for me. I came from a large corporate entity. Ironically, it was, the mood was kind of the mood of the day based on the numbers, and I can go a long road down that, but it's much different here. We're in it with each other. We're part of being a team that grows the business, and it's just a lot of fun, and then to have the support of your organization behind you through, through the challenging times, right? It's not always easy. Amazon, again, love them, great company, but they're, be careful the devil you dance with sometimes. So there's why don't we have this already, or why don't we have that? So when you start building that real team entity, you can get a lot of things done.
Yeah, I get that. What has balanced you? I mean, you've worked in companies that were corporate, more startup now. What has balanced you and kept you grounded in good times and in bad as you've been on this leadership journey?
Well, I think there's a few different things, but as far as like the work, I mean, my wife is a huge part of that. She's amazing. She's been part of my journey for 30 years. She knows me better than anybody. She's really my best friend. She's not scared to hurt my feelings at all. I'll tell you that. That woman is somehow sometimes. So she's probably part of the base of that.
Sure.
And but building off of that, having a team environment here that we stick it through. I mean, there's been times, where I'm a family guy. I mean, I got 3 daughters, wife. I don't work 80 hours a week, right? And we encourage. That's not the type of environment we have. But we work hard, right? And there's times, I'll get here 7:45, and Erin will be busy doing something, and she's just been working really hard at getting some of our systems on the next level generation of things. And we'll be here till 6:30, and
sure.
We're all in it together. We're like, all right, we got to go home kind of thing. And I think those types of things make the long days easier to manage. When you have a team behind you, it just makes the world a difference. And, I've been on teams where the team wasn't behind me, and that's not fun. Right. And I always say, if you're not rowing, that's fine. If you need help, we'll figure out. But, this team is more important than any one person. Right. And if you're not rowing long enough, you're not going to be in this boat. There's plenty of opportunities out there for you, and being that candid about it. I mean, some people, that culture is not for them. Fine. Go work for another company, but we're in it as a team. And when we interview people, we're like, this is a startup. We don't know sometimes what the day brings, and you got to be willing to, to grind it out sometimes. But I mean, we also have fun, and we had a lot of fun. Wish I had kept the automation in there. We have fun too. We've done whitewater rafting together. We've done different things, and we can have a lot of good laughs here too. So I think it's my team would be a better person to ask, but I think we have a really healthy culture here.
Well, and I think even for that leadership level, it's important for them to feel like it's a healthy culture, right? The ones who are helping define that, but your team also finishes that definition of what a healthy culture is. So when you were looking and you were leaving your last position, how did you identify that CapTron was the right place for you?
Well, that's a stories on stories. So, being somebody who has hired people before, I always knew I never wanted to hire somebody who's running away from a job, right?
Okay.
And to be blunt, I was running away from my previous organization. They had lost their way. Customers were last on the list. It had become very, very toxic culture. I mean, we'll just leave it at that. Very, very
Yeah.
toxic culture. Nothing I wanted to be part of anymore. But I had to figure out what I was running to, right?
Mm.
And so that's really what shaped my conversation. And for folks out there who may be listening to this, if you don't like your organization, that's fine. But define what you're looking to run to before you start looking for it, right?
Yeah.
And ironically, I mean, I had some good models out there, right? We've been in the space now, the automation space, and one of the best competitors at the time that I was familiar with was Festo and Schunk, right? Two
Yeah.
great German companies, right? And they're just out there killing it.
Yeah.
They marketed themselves well. Their salespeople that I spoke to generally liked working for them. There's always some outliers out there, but I knew and I like to win. I mean, I told you, competitive guy, right? I run races and stuff like that. I wanted to be on a team that was winning, and I defined it myself as, I mean, and this is maybe a little controversial, but a lot of American publicly traded companies are kind of like the big oak trees in the forest, right?
Yep.
But they're decaying, right? Some of them really struggling, like GE, right? For example, you looked
Yep.
at them, they got so big and they eventually started to topple and fall over. And that's what I saw, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
this is not sustainable. Like, you got 80 people who aren't working, getting paid six figures. This is ridiculous,
Wow.
right? You're sidelining them because you're just worried about cutting costs all the time and you're not getting them the information. So I knew that forest was dying, but what was coming up underneath it, that's what I wanted to be part of. And so I was looking for a privately held German company that was customer centric, that had good leadership. Those
Wow.
were I mean, I had it in my head and I had gotten plenty of calls, decent resume. And so, but if that didn't fit the bill, I wasn't part of the conversation. And when I had first talked to Philip Bellum, who's, the CEO and owner of CapTron, I think it was almost like a little bit of love at first sight, for lack of better terms, but the conversations went so well, right? And I
Yeah.
could tell he was honest, he was transparent, it resounded in me, and that's what
Hmm.
he's like, Sean, I screwed this up. I started running and nobody was following me, right? Because I didn't cast the vision. I'm like, bingo, been there, done that, right?
Yep.
And so that's really what I decided to do. And I wanted to be on a team that was winning,
Yep.
that had something to offer customers and bring value. So that's really what I focused on, is what brings value, right? And you look at companies like Festo and Shunk, they're just killing it out there. So
Yeah.
I don't need to reinvent the wheel, go be part of something like that. And that's what I'm
Yeah.
part of now.
That's awesome. So, and we're going to do a manufacturing connector episode about the technology. So I don't want to dive too deep into the technology, but what does the future of CapTron hold? I mean, you are relatively a startup in the US and North America. So what does the future for the people hold at CapTron?
Well, that brings a smile to my face, because we're coming out with some tech. We have some amazing technology already, right? I mean, we have
Yeah.
some. Obviously, Amazon hasn't spent $50-some million on our product because it's really neat, right? And it serves a purpose in the automation space. But we're in the process of coming out with, well, we have come out with a software that manages picking and putting for a lot of applications in manufacturing and warehousing like that. But we have recently designed and releasing a automated cart that I believe, I'm very excited. And to your point, we're not going to dive too much in the details, but it's a game changer for a lot of people getting into automation, right?
Interesting.
It's going to blow the doors off this place. I mean, that's what I'm very passionate about. That's what excites me, because the conversations that I've already had with customers, I've had video casts like this, and when I start showing them, I watch them go like this. They're just leaning in because they see the value of it, right? And
Yeah.
it's easy to explain the value of it. It's like, wow, this is a game changer. I can literally put somebody on a cart who may be hungover, who has never worked this type of job in their life, and I can make them up and running, picking orders within a minute, 30 seconds. Yeah, we
Yeah.
can do that for you.
That's
That
awesome.
is a game changer type of thing. So very excited about that. And again, the people around it, the people who have made it work, the team that's developed this in Germany, they're incredible. And so we have two pilot companies out in Europe and Japan right now. We're working with one getting started here in the USA, and we're hoping to launch this thing formally in March. So it's going to be a game changer for us.
That's awesome.
Oh, for sure. Awesome.
Sean, you one thing I meant to talk about earlier, you talked to me about the four disciplines in our intro call. Walk us through that principle. The four disciplines of execution, I believe, is what you were
Yeah.
talking about.
I have this 4DX. And kind of to the conversation that we started earlier, we talked about mentorship, right?
Yeah.
And just probably being a little too transparent here, but leading some of the younger generation has been challenging to me. I came from a corporate entity where I was the youngest person in the room, right? I mean, I walked in the room as a leader. I was 32 years old, and I mean, frankly speaking, they were all older white men. Well, they had been
Yeah.
professionals longer than I had, so they knew what to expect. They knew how to manage me, right?
Yeah.
And so, coming to an organization where we're still hiring younger people all the time, right? And there's certain times where they just do things that baffled me.
Yeah.
I would start getting frustrated, and I'm trying to create this environment where I want healthy culture, all the stuff we talked about, but I didn't know how to handle it. So I went to a mentor. We talked about mentorship, and I said, "Hey, Dave, just being honest here, I don't know what I'm doing here. I've never dealt with this model before. You're president, you're running a $120 million company, right? You got to hire younger people. How are you doing with it?" And so he said, "Sean, you got to get this book. It's called The 40X, right? And it's not rocket science. It's very easy to read, but it basically it's all the conventional stuff, wisdom that we know about now. But they do some things that make it very easy to talk about. And I think one of the biggest takeaways that we've had from this is we have weekly WIG meetings, and it has crafted the culture we have now. But WIG stands for Wildly Important Goals.
Oh,
And it basically is everyone's got their job, right? Everyone's, hey, you're doing your podcast, you're developing this business you're working with, but what is one thing you can do this week that's above and beyond that's going to move that needle
mm,
one extra click? And the coolest part about it, and this is where Dave really said, is that the boss doesn't decide what the wig is, the person does.
I
So
love
we
that.
literally sit down every week and we go around the room and we say, all right, what's your wildly important goal? All right, now first thing we do is, what was your last week's goal and did you complete it? Right.
Ah,
So it's got to be measurable. So it's on a board. We say, hey, or it's on a spreadsheet. Yeah, this is my goal. I'm sorry, I didn't get it done. And so it brings this extra level of like, I'm accountable to this team, right? I don't want to
yeah.
come to this meeting empty handed, but you created the task,
Right.
and it forces you to think about, well, what task can I do that I know is going to impact the lead measures of an organization? So this book gets into a lot of details, but it's got lead and lag measures. So your lag measures your scoreboard, right? Your sales is when the work's all done, right?
Yeah.
And I love companies who are constantly focused on sales, sales, sales. It's like the coach on the sideline looking at the scoreboard, expecting it to change, and not looking at the field and working with the players, right? So
Yeah.
we can go. That's a long, fun story. But look at the scoreboard the whole time, and they don't talk about strategy and things that actually will change the way their players are working to get the ball to move. So the lead measures are what impacts the scoreboard, right? So you want
Yeah.
to pick something that's gonna your lead measure. What am I going to work on? Well, if you're in sales, right, I'm gonna focus on 15 sales call with this type of agenda, with this type of value proposition to talk to the customers. Well, for the operations folks, well, I'm going to change this so we can take orders over the phone in this amount of time, right?
Oh,
So you're working on the specific tasks that move the needle towards the bigger vision, right? To be the most technically supportive partner to our customers, delivering value every day. And so that has taken, I mean, we've been doing this now for about 4 or 5 months. It has taken this company to the next level
wow.
because everybody's focusing on, okay, I'm going to get caught in, and we all have emails up the wazoo, right?
Oh,
But at the end of the day, I want to get that wig done. I got to get
yeah.
these demo cases together for for our distributors to make it really easy for them to present to our customers. I got
Yeah.
to get that done. That always could be like something that gets off to the wayside, but it's on my WIG meeting. And as the leader of this thing, I don't want to come and get a red, right?
Yeah.
Right. No one wants to come to that meeting and say they didn't get it done. Right.
Yep.
And so having that weekly meeting of accountability to something that they believe is important to their role, in my role, all of our roles, it's like you have a say in what you're doing. Like you have a voice in delivering results in this organization. And again, I think it's brought a level of cohesion to our team that's just been a game changer. So I'm a big proponent of it.
Oh, I love that. And maybe it's my persona, right? That would fit well with CapTron because I also am a competitive person. So not only do I love holding myself accountable, but I don't want to show up and be empty-handed or get that red mark or not be viewed in that way as being successful, right? Or accomplishing that goal. So I think that speaks to also the culture that you're building and the hiring practices that you have in identifying the right people to work on the CapTron team, because there are people who would say, I don't give a shit. Like that means nothing to me, right? That's not going to fit in that kind of a culture because that's what you're building.
Yeah, you got to want to compete. I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing. If you don't want to get in this boat and row, you're not gonna get in this boat, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. There's a lot of people. I mean, I talk to people, I talk to people all the time. They just love their cozy job. They work 3 or 4 hours a day, answer some emails, make a few bucks. Good for you. I was miserable when I couldn't work, right?
Yep.
But and I'm here. I mean, I'm even getting anxious now talking to you, Jim. I'm like, oh crap, I do got to get my WIG done. It's Friday. I have a meeting at 3:00 on Monday, for crying out loud. So
well, I won't keep you too much longer, man. All right. But yeah. I think you brought up a really important point, Sean, that I wanted to briefly touch on, and this could almost be its own episode in itself. You talked about being at one point being the youngest person in the room, right? But you were leading a group of people that understood how to manage you as their leader, right? And I think, as we look at the younger generations, one of the things that I think as leaders we feel with the younger generations that exist in the world of work right now is they don't know how to manage up. They don't know how to manage their leaders. Is that something you feel is an appropriate statement or a true statement, or do you think that generational difference is something else?
To your point, Jim, that could be a whole fun podcast by itself. But like many things, I think it's an equation with multiple variables, right? Okay. The people coming into the workforce now, a lot of them, they spend a lot of their education in COVID, right?
Yeah.
They spent a lot of their lives with these things, right? You and I didn't have these things when we were 20 years old, right? I mean,
thank goodness.
Thank God there's there's a lot of context to the younger generation that's, and I think they get a bad rap in a lot of cases. But from my personal experiences, they say, well, the younger generation, they're terrible. There's a little bit difference, but Jim, I don't know how old you are, but you got gray in your beard. Are you in your 40s?
45, man.
Right, same age, 45. I think our generations and perhaps previous generations had more of a distribution curve, right? Where there was a really solid average. What I'm seeing, at least subjectively from my side, is there's not a strong average of just average workers. They're either really good or they suck. There's not a big middle ground there,
sure,
like you used to have. So so you kind of got that dynamic, and then you have this dynamic of they don't know what they don't know. A lot of remote work, so they don't know how to behave in an office. They don't know what's expected of them, and in a lot of cases, maybe even working remote type of thing, you don't necessarily have older people kind of teaching them, right? You have. I learned when I first got into sales, I was surrounded by older salespeople, so I kind of learned how to behave from them, right?
Yep.
Or they told me, hey, Sean, you shouldn't do that, kind of thing.
Yep.
And so what I do and what I'm still learning. I mean, again, that could be a full fun podcast, but You just got to really create an environment where they feel comfortable. Like, hey, that's not appropriate, or you got to watch this. This may communicate that message if you behave this way. And again, that kind of comes down to timing. There's certain times, and sometimes I screw it up. But I think that's really what it's going to take to help this younger generation just adapt to the work environment. I mean, they don't know what they don't know, and they weren't dealt the same hand of cards that we were, stuck at home doing this during COVID. That just kind of, that's not cool.
That's tough. Yeah, it sucks.
So,
all right, Sean, are you hiring right now at CapTron?
We are hiring right now. We're actually looking for a data entry person right now. So, and I'm sure that will continue this year or continue more this year. But yeah, we're hiring right now. So if you know anybody it's got to be local. We want our people in the office. We're not a remote folks. You got to be part of this culture. You got to get in the boat and row. So you got to be in the Fort Mill, South Carolina area, or at least willing to drive a little bit.
Well, anybody in this Fort Mill, South Carolina, or in commutable distance, reach out to Sean, because this sounds like a pretty badass place to work. Sean, how can people find you?
Well, LinkedIn. Well, of course, you can always go to us at CapTron.com. Our phone number's on the website there.
Yeah.
But very vocal on LinkedIn. So Sean Walters or CapTron North America, you'll find us right away.
Awesome. So Sean, last question I ask all of my guests. What haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience?
I recently did a video. It was about 5 minutes long about automation in the U.S. and it kind of related to the whole longshoreman strike. And I just found it to be very interesting. But the video has got a crazy amount of play time. And I think if I was to leave the audience with anything is, some people have come back to me, well, it's going to eliminate people's jobs. And as somebody who's been in this, been in this industry now for 20 plus years, that's not true. It creates healthier jobs. It brings back a level of skill to our country that we need. Again, I'm competitive. I want our country to be competitive. We've been consumer based for too long. We've had these long supply chains that have just, it's always cheaper. And I think I'm just passionate about automation. And if people have any doubts, just look at some of the stats on how we automate more, people get paid more, and jobs are better jobs. So just passionate about it.
I love it, man. Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. Telling your story, giving some insights. Loved hearing some of the challenges that you faced, the people you've led. Really appreciate your time with us today.
Jim, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Again, a huge thank you to Sean for sharing his experiences, his stories, a book. You can see it on his desk right there. And most importantly, his passion. That's the one thing that I took away from this was Sean's passion is palatable. You can feel it. And I hope you guys picked up on that as much as I did. I hope you found some new ideas, some insights, and definitely some inspiration to take back into your own journey in leadership. Folks, remember, if you want to stay in the loop, dive deeper at the Manufacturing Connector. That's the mfgconnector.com. And join us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And again, don't forget to check out our other show, The Manufacturing Connector, on YouTube for hands-on solutions and tech insights that are actively shaping the industry that we all love. And CapTron will have an episode probably come out early part of next year before that is released, maybe after. I don't know. I'll have to work with Sean on that. But if you've enjoyed today's episode, folks, please share it with a friend, a colleague, your grandmother, and consider leaving us a rating or a review or whatever it takes on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, whether it's YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or any of the other platforms that are out there. Your support helps bring us more incredible stories like Sean's to the forefront of the industry, but it also rockets us up the charts and helps other people find the show. And really, that keeps us going. So make sure that you're doing that. Again, to you all, our dear listeners, our dear viewers, if you're on YouTube, thanks again for being here. And we'll see you next time on the Manufacturing Culture Podcast.